Hello everyone, my name is Abhishek and welcome back to my channel. Today we are at day 21 of our DevOps course. Yeah, we are already halfway done, day 21. I'm so surprised that we already have done from day 0 to day 21 where we talked about different aspects of DevOps. So how are you feeling? Are you learning new things in DevOps? Please put that in the comment section. Share your feedback on how this course is going or what are you feeling about the rest of the sessions? Are you excited about it or not? Okay, perfect. So coming to today's topic, I'll not waste a lot of time. I'll quickly jump into the video. Today's topic is about Jenkins or CICD interview questions. So the reason why I said Jenkins is because uh, these answers differ from tool to tool. Only some of them are common. Like whenever somebody asks you what is the CI/CD process, then the answer is same, but it depends on tool to tool. So we cannot take all of them. Let's try to focus on one thing, and then you can answer the questions on that specific thing. So majority of people even till date use Jenkins. So that's why let's take Jenkins into consideration and let's see what are the interview questions and how to answer those interview questions. So all of these questions are scenario based, and like every time I have put these questions in the GitHub repository itself. Many people have forked this repository. I've already seen that, and people have like 45 forks. So many people are following this repository Jenkins zero to hero. So the reason for that, what I thought is I'll put this interview questions also in the same repository, and everybody who is watching this video, they can look into the detailed answers. Probably when I'm explaining the answers, I might not cover little things or very simple things. So you can definitely cover them as part of reading this document. Perfect. So firstly, the very important question that people would ask you is what is the CI/CD process in your organization, right? So this is a way to understand what are you exactly doing, what is CI/CD in your own terms, or what is your knowledge on CI/CD. So that's why you have to explain this thing in a detailed way, and I've also tried to put the answers also in detailed way. Okay, so refer to this MD file or the file that I've committed to GitHub so that you get more information. Perfect. So to quickly explain you have to decide upon the programming language. Let's say in your organization you are using a programming language Java, because the tools and technology differs from programming language to programming language. So let's take example of Java, and firstly you have to explain, okay, so in our current organization to achieve the CI/CD process, we are using Jenkins as an orchestrator, and we have orchestrated different tools like Maven, Sonar, AppScan, then you can say Argo CD, Kubernetes, Helm, whatever you would like to, depending upon the pipeline. But the important part is you explain each and every tool. Like for example, you say that in our current organization, we are using GitHub as source code repository, where when any developer X commits the code into the source code repository, a Jenkins pipeline is automatically triggered. And as part of the first step, this Jenkins pipeline pulls the code from the source code repository. And once the code is pulled and checked out, the next step would be building this code, and we use Maven as part of this process. If you're using any other programming language, at this point of time, you have to change from Maven to different build language. Once Maven builds the application, the next thing that we do is we verify if the code quality, or we verify if static code analysis, or we verify the application software is secure or not. After that, we use some tool called as AppScan. Again, this is used for security testing like SAST or DAST. And after that, we try to promote this application onto dev environment using Argo CD and Kubernetes. So Kubernetes is your platform, or it is your dev environment, and you explain that we use Argo CD to continuously monitor. Argo CD is a declarative continuous delivery tool, right? So you explain that Argo CD would look for Kubernetes manifests in the Git repository, and whenever there is a change, once the application is built and once the application new image is updated, Argo CD will look for this new tag of the image, and using Helm charts, it would deploy the new version of the application onto the target Kubernetes clusters. So if you find this complicated, don't worry. I have an example already. Like, you can refer to this pipeline, Jenkins pipeline, that is again part of this Jenkins zero to hero, where I have explained in a step-by-step approach. Okay, firstly, what you will do, you will check out the code. Then, as part of the build process, this is a Python application. I just used, a Docker image to build, and then I push the artifacts onto the same GitHub repository, like I told you. Then we check out this code and we deploy this application onto Kubernetes cluster. To do that, what I've done is I have written a simple shell script. This is the shell script. What it does is shell commands actually. So what this shell commands does is, once the new application software is built, it goes ahead and updates the deployment manifest, Kubernetes deployment manifest in the GitHub repository with the new tag. And what Argo CD does is Argo CD continuously monitors the concept of GitOps, right? So the concept of GitOps is to continuously monitor the Git repository, and whenever there is a new change, it will pull the application from Git repository and deploy it to Kubernetes cluster. So this is the standard way. You can modify it accordingly. Like, let's say you're not comfortable with Kubernetes, then remove the Kubernetes part and just say that we are deploying the applications onto EC2 instances. Our organization has not yet migrated to Kubernetes. So let's say you are not good with Kubernetes. So again, refer to the detailed answer here. The next question would be, what are the different ways to trigger Jenkins pipelines? So again, this is very important because if you have any version control system and you have Jenkins, so both of them are isolated tools, right? You are not using GitHub Actions. If you are using GitHub Actions, then GitHub Actions takes place on event that you are providing. It is part of your GitHub application, so it can trigger automatically. But GitHub is a different tool. Jenkins is a different tool. Whenever developer X commits code to GitHub, how will GitHub notify Jenkins? Or how will Jenkins understand that, okay, so there is a change that has happened in GitHub, I have to execute my pipeline. So that's the reason why people ask this question. And to answer this, there are three ways to achieve it. One is Polesium, one is build triggers, and one is webhooks. So regarding Polesium and build triggers, I've written in the document, but the better way of doing it is using webhooks. Okay, why? Because both the Polesium or build triggers, if you take build triggers, you can configure it for every minute as well. But the problem is that it's a very costly process. Okay, because for every minute, what Jenkins will try to do is it will try to look at GitHub and it will try to see, it will perform some git fetch commands to understand if there is any changes in the Git repository from its previous cache that it has stored. Jenkins has stored. This is a very costly process. And the problem with Polesium, or like again, if you provide any cron job is that it will only execute during the specific cron time that you have provided. But if developer has committed a code commit at 6 o'clock and your cron job runs at 11 a.m., then there is a 5 hours of lag, which is again a problem. So to avoid all these problems, you use webhooks. So webhooks is a way, whenever GitHub, okay, whenever GitHub is making any code change, whenever a developer is making any code change on GitHub, what GitHub does is it will send a payload. Payload is nothing but a JSON format of information which contains everything, like who is the code committer, what is the pull request, the number that he has created, who is the assignee, who has to verify this. All the information is provided by Jenkins in a JSON format, and you have to configure that webhook in the GitHub settings section. Once you do that, what GitHub does is, okay, on this specific action, the DevOps engineer said me that whenever any developer commits a code change, then send this complete JSON payload information to Jenkins. Okay, so the same thing Jenkins does. Jenkins notifies GitHub. GitHub notifies Jenkins using the API and the payload, and Jenkins pipeline get executed. Okay, so if you want to understand more, read about GitHub Jenkins webhooks. It will hardly take 10 minutes to configure. Even if you have your local setup, both GitHub and Jenkins, it will not take much time. But the important information here is the efficient way to do this or achieve this is using the GitHub webhooks. Next thing, how to backup Jenkins. So there are DevOps engineers who take care of Jenkins administration as well, whether it is on AWS, whether it is on premise or any other cloud provider. So this is important for them. Some organization expects you to have administrative knowledge as well. So basically, if you just want Jenkins backup, you can just take the backup of .jenkins folder. Let's say you have installed Jenkins using Jenkins user, or by default Jenkins is installed and there is a user called Jenkins. But let's say you did not do the default installation, you did using some scripts and you install Jenkins. Then go to the home directory of the user where you install Jenkins. Then there is a folder called .jenkins. It's a hidden folder. Okay, that's why it's called .jenkins. So inside that .jenkins, there are pipeline jobs that are running. There are logs and configuration information that is present inside the .jenkins. So typically, you can just take backup of the .jenkins using rsync. Rsync is a shell command. What it does is it will recursively sync. If you set up rsync, it will recursively sync the .jenkins folder onto any backup system. It can be EBS volume or it can be any backup system that you configure. This is the one way of doing it. But apart from Jenkins, there are some specific organizations which use databases to store the information, right? Let's say you are using Jenkins predominantly for 100 teams, 1000 teams, then it is very difficult to store all of the information of Jenkins into one disk. So that's why they use some external database. In such cases, you have to take backup of those databases as well, which has the information of Jenkins. And then if you want to backup plugins, or if you want to backup, let's say, some user content, I have provided the information how to do it. But predominantly, you can just say that you can take backup of .jenkins folder using rsync, and you can take backup onto any EBS or as a snapshots or volumes or something. Perfect. Then how do you store, secure, or handle secrets? The reason why I give three options is interviewers ask in different ways. Most efficient or most asked question is how do you handle secrets in Jenkins? Handling secrets is important in any tool. Okay, forget about Jenkins, forget about Argo CD or any tool. Handling secrets is the most important, because whenever there is a sensitive information, if you're leaking that sensitive information as part of your logs or as part of the UI that users are seeing, then you're compromising on the security of your organization. As a DevOps engineer, you should definitely ensure that there are no secrets or certificates, or no sensitive information is leaked. So to achieve that, Jenkins provides multiple options. Even by default, Jenkins, has the configuration plugins. Using this credential plugins. Using this credential plugins, you can take backup onto a store. But what I would suggest is to explain using some security tools like password storing tools like HashiCorp Vault. So if you are in DevOps field, then you must already have heard about HashiCorp Vault, which is one of the most used tools. It can be integrated with Terraform, it can be integrated with Ansible, Azure DevOps, it can be integrated with Jenkins. So HashiCorp tool is one of the tools that is most used. So go for HashiCorp Vault. Explain that you have integrated Jenkins with HashiCorp Vault. So whenever there is a sensitive information that you want to use in the pipeline, you invoke that secret from HashiCorp Vault. Then what is the latest version of Jenkins? So some people might find this question silly, but it is very important, and I've seen people not answering this and interviewers getting a bad impression on the candidate. The reason for that is, let's say this organization completely relies on Jenkins and they are recruiting DevOps engineer only for the CI/CD position, and that is specifically on the Jenkins. So what happens here is they will expect you to work on Jenkins day-to-day basis. And if you are not able to answer what is the latest version, you might feel that, okay, this is a silly question. But if you're not able to answer, what they will feel is, okay, this guy must have good knowledge on Jenkins, but he does not know, or he is not using Jenkins on a day-to-day basis. So he might not have good knowledge on what are the latest changes in Jenkins or what are the latest plugins. So instead of running into that impression, what you can do is you can just keep updated with the versions of Jenkins if you're using Jenkins. If you're not using Jenkins, and if you want to project yourself as a DevOps engineer using different CI/CD tools, then keep updated yourself with that latest version of the tool. Okay, next thing. What is shared modules in Jenkins? So shared modules is a concept that is again similar in different tools and technologies. So the concept of shared modules is nothing but, let's say I'm working in development team X, and as a DevOps engineer, I wrote pipelines for them. What I've done is I wrote a pipeline that picks up the code from source code repository and deploys onto EC2 instance. Okay, so this is a very simple workflow. But there is development team Y, development team Z, and development team A who also have the same approach. Okay, now instead of they writing the entire pipelines again, what they can do is they can request me to make this Jenkins pipeline that I've written as part of a module, and we can share across multiple teams. So that's why this process is called as shared modules. Okay, so shared modules, shared libraries, okay, all of these things fall into the same category where one person writes the code and it will be reused, or it will be used across multiple teams in the organization. So that's why this concept is called as shared modules or shared libraries. Perfect. After that, can you use Jenkins to build applications with multiple programming languages using different agents in different stages? Don't get confused. The question is very simple. Let's say you have three-tier application, okay? And in the three-tier application, let's say for the front end, you are using Node.js or React or Flutter or anything, okay? And for the back end, you are using Java. And again, you have a application or microservice in the same project, which is using Python, let's say. Okay, or your Java application is reading information from Python application. So now you need three different programming languages to build one application, right? So your Jenkins pipeline should have an environment or should have a worker node which has all of these dependencies set and configured. So now the question is that is it possible using Jenkins or not? Even in our example, whenever I explained Jenkins in the Jenkins Zero to Hero class, I explained how to achieve it, and I also showed example. So simply you can say that Jenkins can do it. The efficient way of doing it is using the Docker agents. What you can do is you can write multiple stages in your Jenkins pipeline, and each stage you can say that, okay, for this stage use this Docker agent, for this stage use this Docker agent with Java, and finally use the Docker agent to Python. And whenever the Jenkins pipeline is executed, finally all your Docker containers are deleted as well. So the important thing here is you are not wasting your computer resources, and you are also not configuring anything on your worker node, right? So your compute resources are saved, and also your maintenance overhead is gone. So that's why I explain this using the Docker agents. After that, how to set up auto scaling groups in Jenkins. This is important because for some organizations, they want to have Jenkins with multiple worker nodes. But again, uh, for some reasons, their applications are very huge and they cannot use Docker agents. So what they have decided is they will use a EC2 instance which acts as a Jenkins master, and there are 20 Jenkins worker nodes, each worker node for one team. But the problem is that during certain days, like during Christmas or during public holidays, they might receive extra load, and for that extra load, they require extra worker nodes. But if you create these worker nodes and if you don't use them, again, that's a problem. So to solve this problem, what they do is they configure Jenkins with auto scaling groups. In EC2 instances or in AWS, auto scaling group takes care of automatically scaling your EC2 instances using predictive scaling or whatever scaling that you configure. So how do you do that? I explained. I don't want to go through the entire thing. It's you just have to explain them the concept, why you're doing it, and what is the advantage of it, like the ones I just explained. And then there are steps on how to create that as well. I've provided in the document. How to add a new worker node in Jenkins? So again, this is a very simple question. To add a worker node in Jenkins, you can just go to the manage Jenkins. And once you go to manage Jenkins, there is an option called manage nodes and clouds. If you're using latest version of Jenkins, in the previous version of Jenkins, it's just manage nodes. So go to manage nodes and clouds. And if you want to add a Docker agent, you can do it using clouds. If you want to add just a virtual machine, then you can click on add a new node, and after that you provide the information of what is the IP address of this node, what are the SSH keys, you want to connect with public key or you want to connect with password. You authenticate it, then you add it as a permanent member, and finally click on the launch button, so your node configuration is done. Next question is how do you install plugins? So to install plugins, like similarly, you can do it through the UI, the exact same way I explained. Instead of manage nodes, you can go to manage plugins and search for the plugin that you want, and you can install. In the previous class, we saw how to install Docker plugin, right? Docker pipeline plugin. This is good. But how do you install plugins? So for the plugins, go to manage plugins and search for the available plugins. Okay. Through the UI, you have done it, but through the CLI also you can do it. And CLI is efficient way of doing it because for some reasons, administrators, let's say you're a DevOps engineer, but you are not Jenkins administrator. So sometimes your UI access is blocked, or you might want to install 100 plugins. So every time you go to the UI, you install it and wait for the plugin to be installed. Instead, you can simply write a shell script and use this Java command. Okay, so this Java command will basically install the plugin that you provide, saying that you should have that plugin in the available plugin section in Jenkins. If you don't have, you have to upload that plugin. Okay, sometimes you might look into the open source Jenkins and say that, oh, okay, this plugin is contributed, but I don't see it in the Jenkins. That is because the plugin might not be matured, or that plugin did not reach GA, so that it's not part of your generally available Jenkins. So in that cases, you have to download that jar and you have to upload that plugin. But if you avoid all those corner cases, generally you can write a shell script and you can achieve it using this shell command. So through the UI and through the CLI, I explained you. Then the next question is, what is JNLP, and why is it used in Jenkins? So JNLP is nothing but, it's a way, how do you allow your agents to talk to your Jenkins master? That is, how do you allow your worker nodes to talk to Jenkins master? So once you set up this SSH configuration, okay, your Jenkins workers will work fine. But there has to be a mechanism how your Jenkins master and slave nodes are talking to each other, right? So what you can simply do is, instead of you can just download this JNLP jar from your Jenkins master UI, and just directly install this JNLP Java jar, and your slave nodes will start working as a agents. So it's a mechanism of how your master node will talk to your uh, the worker nodes. Okay, so that's what I explained here. In Jenkins, JNLP is used to allow agents to be launched and managed remotely by the Jenkins master. Okay, and what it does is, once the Jenkins agent is launched using the JNLP, it connects to Jenkins master and receives the build task which has to be executed. Perfect. Finally, what are some of the common plugins that you use in Jenkins? So this is a final question for today. And to explain the common plugins, okay, so what you need to do is, you have to list some of the plugins, because most of the times what DevOps engineers does is, whenever they install Jenkins, there is an option called install suggested plugins, and they click on it whenever you are trying your sample project or something. And when interviewer asks you, it's not that you don't know about the plugins, but it does not come to your mind because it's not at top of your head, right? On top of your mind, you don't have some list of plugins. So when you take time, interviewer might again feel that, okay, so you might be good with Jenkins, but you are not using it recently. So to avoid that, just be prepared with list of plugins. It does not take much time. Whenever you are installing Jenkins, just see what plugins Jenkins is installing, and you can just come up with that as your answer. So perfect. So these are the questions that I have for you. And if you have any questions, let's say I have not covered as part of this Jenkins zero to hero interview questions, you can submit a pull request. I'll review the pull request and I'll merge this into the repository, so that any other people who are looking at this repository will be benefited out of it. I hope you like this video, and in case you have any feedback for me, just post that in the comment section. If you haven't subscribed to our channel, please subscribe to our channel and share with your friends and people who are looking to learn DevOps. Thank you so much. I'll see you in the next video. Take care, everyone. Bye.